governance within social ecological systems. And I have quite a few discussion questions to engage with everyone, as well as hear your own thoughts and perspectives on fisheries and social ecological systems, as well as governance. So hopefully we can get some nice discussion today. So again, my research is on adaptive co-management for Indonesian small-scale fisheries governance. I'm working with myself, Dr. Prateep Kumar Nayak, and Dr. Inda Sasalawati. And I worked in collaboration with University of Waterloo, SHIRC, University of Diponegoro in Indonesia, as well as the V2V Global Partnership. A little bit of just what we're going to talk about today, sort of some key areas. I'm not going to state everything. You guys can sort of just glance through it there. But there will be some things of my research, as well as some discussion questions on the general governance as well. So to get everyone warmed up and get everyone brains thinking, I'm curious to understand or realize what governance strategies you believe should be used for social ecological systems, such as small-scale fisheries. So there's various types of governance strategies: adaptive co-management, community-based management, command and control management. So I'm just interested to see what the peers in the room sort of think about governance and what they think is the best way forward. Feel free just to jump in. I can't really see hands or anything, so.
So do you want anybody to share their perspective, or do we have a time to brainstorm as well?
Anybody could just sort of explain their perspective, and if anyone else has something to add, we can discuss on that. But maybe if one or two people want to discuss sort of what they believe should be used for governance, that would be good just to kick us off.
So I can go first.
Yep.
So to my perspective, governance, of course, it depends on the context, in which context we're talking about, the place, the narratives. So from my perspective, co-governance is more effective compared to other governance approaches. And of course, in some places, maybe hierarchical or self-governance is also effective, depending on the context. Yeah, so this is in short my response.
Yeah, and that's a good response. And I think we're seeing that on a lot of small-scale fisheries and social ecological systems, with them beginning that transition to, as you stated, that co-governance and sort of sharing of power and responsibilities. Yeah. Anyone else want to note something? If not, there's more discussion questions later, so no problem.
I have a point that I wrote, I think, listening to your initial question, I would like to put it as governance is about how do you navigate or you govern the various nuances, that we see within a social ecological system. So I'm trying to kind of articulate it in a different and new way, but I just wanted to put that as a response to your question. So.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Prateep. I appreciate that. Yeah, so for having governance for social ecological systems, as Prateep mentioned, can be difficult and tricky because there's so many different factors or nuances intersecting the system that you have to account for. Awesome. So great discussions on the first question there. A little bit of background and the problem within small-scale fisheries that many of us already are aware of is small-scale fisheries support over 100 million people globally. They provide avenues to solve various sustainable development goals, including poverty alleviation, food security, and nutrition, just to name a few. I know there's many others. They also, like we've stated, require specific governance strategies due to these nuances and changes and interactions occurring within them. As well, they're comprised of marginalized individuals, namely women. I think I read a report that came out recently that over half of the 500 million or 100 million that are made up of small-scale fisheries are women, as well as small-scale fisheries usually occur in common spaces and are embedded within social ecological systems, making the governance of these areas very difficult, complex, and calling for transdisciplinary approaches with various scholars. So what interests me in Indonesia? In Indonesia, fishers only make on average 100 to 300 Canadian dollars per month from capture fisheries. So very, very low. And when you convert that to USD, it's even less. As well, Indonesia is one of the largest archipelagic countries in the world with over 17,000 island states. And many of these states are heavily reliant on fishing for consumption and livelihood. Indonesia is one of the largest marine capture fisheries in the world, slightly behind India and China. So again, calling for more attention to fisheries in this context. And fishing is not just a job for Indonesian people, it's their way of livelihood. They know nothing else. It's not something they chose to do, it's just something they've always done. To make sure we're all on the same page about adaptive co-management, a little bit of a system or a definition here is adaptive co-management is a governance approach implemented within complex social ecological system that rely on the ecological knowledge of the local users, so fishers and other users, institutional linkages between organizations, social capital such as increased levels of trust, and formal and informal networks between users and organizations, as well as learn by doing approaches that can facilitate governance, such as what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how can we adapt and learn from these. So this form of governance allows for adaptation to dynamic conditions or times of uncertainty within communities and small-scale fisheries, hoping to increase adaptive capacity and resilience of these vital communities. And then we have a few gaps in literature that I was trying to address throughout my research, and I have a discussion question about these after this slide. So adaptive co-management from Folk et al. 2005 noted that adaptive co-management is scarcely implemented in social ecological systems because current managers see it as a threat to existing command and control structures, because it is a way to give everyone an equal share and an equal power. As well, Burkess 2011 noted that more governance was needed within small-scale fisheries, especially when they're embedded in social ecological systems. As many of us know, most small-scale fisheries are embedded within social ecological systems. And then the last gap, fairly recent gap, identified by Diaz et al. 2023, noted that there's more research needed on how sort of small-scale fisheries can transition from this concept of vulnerability to viability. And that's really what I was looking at there. And then we had great discussions for the first one. So another little probing question, just interested to hear from my peers as well, is why do you think so little attention and research has been brought to the governance of social ecological systems such as fisheries, when if we go back, you can see in 2005, it was already calling for increased research. And in 2023, we're still calling for that increased research. So I'm interested to see some opinions on why you think this has happened. I can't see hands, so feel free just to blurt out your answer. Yep, Riel, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, just to start the conversation. So I think, as you know, the small-scale fisheries is historically marginalized, undervalued, underrepresented, and their contribution is mostly invisible they're not the value of small scale fisheries and social ecological system. You cannot put it in a monetary value hardly, right? So a lot of the sectors, they go by the contribution, they go by the numbers sometimes. Recently, I had an experience talking to one of the academic in Bangladesh. I was talking about my research and my field. They were like, "Oh, is this really a field to move forward with research and study?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's one of them." Like that's why small scale fisheries are underestimated, marginalized, and there has not been a lot of discussion, a lot of research on that. If you even if we search in Scopus or Web of Science, you will see not many people are working on small scale fisheries. So maybe I would say at some point people have had their focus on small scale fisheries and social ecological system, and later they changed their interest, switching to different discipline, different areas. I can be wrong, but this is also one of my observation. So I think that's why small scale fisheries research is still there is researchers are talking about there is more research needed to unpack the complexity of social ecological system and their governance.
Yeah, that's a great contribution there. And if anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free. I think you made a great point there, Rio, with the marginalized individuals and how small scale fisheries are usually overlooked because of their contributions. And I find it very interesting just doing searches in literature, and there seems to be a lot about large scale fisheries, going back to your point on probably their contributions. However, there's little information on small scale fisheries, and it really makes me passionate to sort of understand these more and bring more attention to them. So if anyone else wants to share their thoughts on this question, yeah, feel free. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I agree with all that Riel has said, but I want to add to it that it's because the small scale fishers do not have a voice. They do not have the strength because in my country, for instance, in Nigeria, the figures are out there about the contribution of small-scale fisheries to food security, to employment, and so on. And the figures are much more higher than what you get from industrial sector or from the aquaculture sector. But still, they are marginalized because they do not have a political strength, they do not have the voice. Unlike the industrial sector where it's capital intensive, and so you have people, industrialists and people who have political connections in that sector. And aquaculture also has in my country political backing because they have strong members, retired presidents and all that in that sector. But in the small-scale fisheries sector, they do not have the voice, they do not have the political strength, and so they are struggling on their own. And so when it comes to the issue of socio-ecological systems, you are even making it more complex because you are talking of the ecology, their social issues, and not even about their contributions in terms of employment and fish supply to the local community and to the country. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great point. I'll touch on it in just a second. I know I see another hand, so feel free to jump in there. Oh, no hands, no worries. Yeah, you brought up.
Irene, sorry, I think Irene
Sorry,
had
yeah, go
his
ahead.
hand
Yes.
up, and then now Mamali Maji. Yeah. Oh, Irene
no
is talking
problem.
now, I think.
Yes, thank you for the time. So, I basically from Java, but now I'm moving to Kalimantan. So, according to your question, in Demak, usually the small scale fisher has a bad character. So they usually didn't have some help from the governments, also from the corporate. So the children and the women are moving to another sector, like in the factories, like manufacture and etc. Because Demak also a lot of factory on there, and some small scale fishers cannot going to the far of the sea because they don't have much of boat, so they only have 5 GT and more, so they didn't have a lot of change. That's why the last 2022 I accompany Simar from also Professor Naya in Karimun Island, Karimun Java. There is a lot of different small sea fisher from Demak also in Karimun. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And great way to tie the question back into Indonesia and your context there as well. And going back to the previous point, I know there's a hand, I'll get to it in just a second. It was a great point that a lot of small scale fishers are lacking that voice and lacking that backing from heavy political or corporate actors. And these are things that, with governance approaches, us as early career researchers and other scholars are trying to identify and figure out. So all the points that we've said are very great and great discussion so far on that. I know there is one more hand. I think you're muted, unfortunately. Yeah, you might be muted there.
You are unmuted now. Can you speak?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think collective governance is the individual responsibility. It is shared responsibility in social ecological system. By addressing collective governance, we can also address the conflict of interest, including between agencies, NGOs, and fishers. That's why it is so important, and we can. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. It is so important to have the inclusions and these conversations, not only with ourselves as scholars, but also with the fishers themselves, right? And to try and understand how we can bring more attention and more support to these vital communities. Thank you, everyone, for those great discussions. Everyone had fantastic points there. So going back a little bit after the gaps there, the objective of the current research I was doing was to determine if adaptive co-management dynamics are present within fishing communities of Tembak Belusan and Purworejo Moro Demak in the Demak region of Indonesia, and to determine if adaptive co-management could be implemented within these communities, aiding in the facilitation and transition of V2V. Some of the methods that were employed throughout this study were very qualitative heavy, multi-method there. And I started with illustrations, observations in common areas, so non-participant observations, informal conversations, fisher surveys, as well as semi-structured interviews. And to start, when I initially visited the communities, I began with my illustrations to sort of map and understand social drivers, ecological drivers, as well as economic drivers influencing fishers in the communities. And then to first determine what two communities I'd be doing. These were my sampling strategies, and this was just for communities. They must meet all 4 criteria steps. And to do this, I worked in collaboration. I see some of them in the call with the V2V team in Indonesia, and I relied on them heavily to help me with this sampling here. So they must have met the four criteria, which have been 50% of residents being small-scale fisheries. They must be close to Semarang City. They must have elements of either co-management or collaborative management already intersecting the community, as well as they must have connections to Universitas of Diponegoro, which was my home base for the research. Going back to my illustrations now, when I went to the communities, I sort of did a recogniza and tried to understand what the social, economic, and ecological drivers were influencing the system. And you can see here, this is of the first community, Tembak Bulusan, and there's a variety of ways fishers interact, variety of ways economic factors interact, and a variety of ecological factors. You can see fishers use the mangroves for fishing, they use the river for fishing, they use the beach for tourism and the ocean for tourism. Aquaculture contributes to their economic status, and they process fish in their homes. So this was a way of me to visualize all the complex aspects within small-scale fisheries. And then you can see the different community here, which is Purworejo Moro Demak, which is a much larger community than Tembak Bulusan. And it has a lot more economic sectors intersecting it, such as a local market. It has a fish auction. There's police and military there that are there for fisheries management. There's gas station for fishing boats. There's fish shuttles that bring fish from fish landing to the market. So there's a lot more economic connectivity within this community. After I finished sampling my communities, I moved on to sampling fishers for my surveys, and then sampling leaders for my interviews. So again, this was done through purposeful sampling, and to be considered as a fisher or a leader, they must have met all of the four criteria under each. So for fishers, they must be a resident of one of the two communities. Their fishing vessel must be classified as a small-scale fishing vessel, which is under 5 GT, and this is from the Indonesian governments themselves, so that's where I got this classification. They must have been a resident in the community for at least 5+ years, so I can understand some adaptability and some learning processes. And the marine capture fishery must make up the majority, so over 50% of the household income to be considered. And then for leaders, they must be a fishery, community, governmental, academic, or NGO partner in the community. They must have held this partner or leadership for at least 3 years. Again, so I can understand the adaptability there. They must work with small-scale fishers, and they must be active. They can't be a past leader. So then my sampling outcomes, I figured I had the two communities, Tembak Bulusan and Purworejo. I sampled 119 small-scale fishers across two communities for fisher surveys. And I conducted 12 interviews with various fishery and governmental leaders partnered in communities. I believe I have a question coming up soon, so get those minds ready. For adaptive co-management, I actually drafted 10 indicators to test in the field for my survey, because I found that there wasn't necessarily 10 set indicators that we can test adaptive co-management with. There's indicators to test co-management. There's indicators to test adaptive management. There's indicators to test design principles of common pool resources, indicators to examine social ecological systems, but nothing on adaptive co-management. So from the various works, you can note at the bottom there, I adapted 10 successful adaptive co-management indicators that are needed to be present in communities in order to facilitate current governance to adaptive governance. So without these 10 indicators, a well-defined resource system, group cohesion, property rights, adaptable management, institutional support, capital, leadership, community participation, delegation of authority, and community empowerment, then the facilitation towards adaptive management won't be possible. And as I mentioned, these indicators are adapted from various works, not only in adaptive and co-management literature, but from other literatures as well. And my survey encompassed 37 questions, and it had 10 indicators. So some of the questions for well-defined resource system were, is it a small scale or is it a transboundary? Is membership to the resource defined? Are there boundaries for cohesion? Can the group collectively organize? Are they empowered to work together? Can they solve problems as a cohesive units for clear property rights? Do they have the legal rights to organize and manage the resource? Have these rights been outlined for the fishers for adaptable management? Do the fishers or the management users implement adaptable management within times of uncertainty, or do they always stick to the same sort of mono-governance strategy? Do they use collaborative tools? And then for institutional support, some questions centered around, is there long-term support? Are there vertical and horizontal connections to institutions? So vertical connections are connections outside of the community to within the community, and then horizontal are between community organizations or governments. And then the last 5 indicators centered around, so capital was about learning, education, training, leadership, talked about legitimacy, the trust of leadership. Are they transparent? Are they accountable? Community participation looked at, can community fishers who are affected by decision-making, are they actively allowed to participate in these? What are the levels of competition? Are there benefits? Delegation of authority? Has it been decentralized? Is there power sharing? Is there enabling policy to let this happen? And then community empowerment to round it off. Are they empowered to work collectively, or is it a more self-centered approach? And then based on these indicators that I've just stated, I can go back a couple slides. What do you think, or what do you feel is the most vital out of these 10 indicators to help facilitate the transition from vulnerability to viability of these adaptive co-management indicators? And I can go back here. So out of these 10, sort of which do you think is the most important or one of the most vital to help transition or facilitate this transition for adaptive co-management? I have a couple in my mind, but I'd be interested to hear others and their thoughts about this. So feel free, if you have an opinion, to raise your hand or just blurt it out. No worries about that. All right, I think I saw Dr. Nayak's hand first. So Prateep, if you want to chime in, sorry.
Yeah, this is a great presentation. Just wanted to make one quick point about the group cohesion and homogeneity. There is a growing literature as well to point at the heterogeneity that is inherent in many of the resource management systems, and therefore management and governance systems that can address those heterogeneity in addition to the homogeneity is required. So I would like to know if you found something with regard to the heterogeneous diverse nature of resource management in units or social ecological systems, and therefore how can you tweak the point number 2 here, or the criteria indicator number 2, from just cohesion and homogeneity to governing and managing both heterogeneity and homogeneity. Okay.
Yeah. When I was in and testing these indicators, I was sort of looking at the gear use, the culture, the ability to collectively organize, work together, be empowered. So yeah, I will definitely work on that and try and get that more zeroed in there. But that's a great point. And it did show within my research on how important collectivity within the small scale fishery and community is itself. Yeah. Thank you very much. I see one more hand there.
Thank you very much. I'm interested in, I think institutional support is very important and community participation. And why I have said this is that the area where the small-scale fisheries are operating are under legal institutional regulations. So for any development in that area, you need the backing of the institutions that are in charge of those coastal areas, because there are laws governing what happens in that area. And community participation is very important, because if the operators do not even know what they're supposed to do within the space wherein they're operating, there's a problem. So there's the need for an understanding between the institutions that are overseeing the areas of operation and the communities that are actually practicing in those areas. There must be a form of collaboration and cooperation that will lead to a beneficial result to the small-scale fishers and to the governing institution. So I think institutional support is more important, and I don't know how you are looking at that and community participation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are some great points there. And I definitely agree with institutional support being an important indicator and factor, because with adaptive co-management, you can facilitate these vertical and horizontal connections with institutions and organizations to help bridge that knowledge, which is vital, like you mentioned. Yeah, so great point there on the institutional and community participation. See one more here, I think, Riel, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I have a bit of different perspective. I would not prioritize any of the criteria or indicator. I see they're all connected. They're all interlinked. For example, if we take like leadership. So to build leadership, we need participation. We need community empowerment. We need institutional support. So I see there are a lot of connection among each other. So prioritizing any of these indicators would be hard for me. And also I agree with Dr. Pradeep that small-scale fisheries or social ecological system in general, they're heterogeneous. It's hard to get like homogeneous community.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And that is a good point to mention there, how a lot of these are sort of interconnected, and you can't sort of have one without having another. Like it's hard to have institutional support without capital building, or capital building without institutional support. So yeah, great points there. Thank you everybody for chiming in there. We'll keep moving. So yeah, based on these results, or based on the survey and the 10 indicators that I implemented, you can see the two different communities there, Tembak Balusan and Puorjo Moral Demak. They had various answers. In Tembak Balusan, the majority of fishers agreed that every indicator was intersecting the community, or there were elements of each indicator present in the community. And then you can see over in Puorjo, every fisher also agreed. However, institutional support, there were some disagreements with the fishers. And then survey results sort of indicated that was because a system wasn't in the form of financial support. It was mainly in the form of either education or training, which upon informal discussions and surveys with fishers, found that that's not really considered support for them. They consider more direct money transfer or subsidy or some more monetary things to help them with support. So I think there was just a little bit of confusion with fishers there for that question. But the main takeaway from this results page is you can see within each community, the fishers are agreeing that these adaptive co-management indicators are present within the community, within their current management regime, showing that it could be possible to transition to adaptive co-management. And then, yeah, with Tembak Balusan, they show positive relationships with all 10 indicators. So the strongest community where adaptive co-management has the most chance of successful implementation would be Tembak Balusan. And participation was the only indicator. I can go back. You can see there in Tembak-Balusan, participation has 65 agree and then 53 disagree. So actually fairly close numbers. But that was because one of the questions was there is a high degree of competition for fishery resources. And most of them, fishers disagreed. You can see 34 out of 40 disagreed, which is actually a positive. So you don't need to read into the high disagreements on participation that much. So just thought I'd bring that up for clarification. And then with Purworejo, Muaro Demak, they're still showing strong relationships. But again, going back to this result here, you can see that institutional support is a weaker relationship and needs some strengthening, whether that be strengthening and understanding what is institutional support or increasing that support. And capital was a little close as well. So I looked at these two a little further. And down here in the graph, you can note two of the survey questions. The surveys for the first one, financial resources are being provided by governments and organizations to aid in monitoring, enforcement, training, and education. Many fishers, so 50 out of the 79 fishers said that there wasn't financial resources being provided. So this is an area to improve, as well as 74 out of the 79 fishers indicated that there's a need for drastically more education, drastically more training to help them here. So I dove a little further and did some interviews. So I did some interviews with the fishery leaders, academic partners, and governmental partners within Purworejo Muaro Demak to investigate what is the issue with institutional support. Is there institutional support, or is there actually no institutional support? And with that, I actually found out there was institutional support intersecting the community. It just goes back to the fishers aren't always aware on what is support or where that support's coming from. And we really need to strengthen that within Purworejo itself to increase the institutional support dynamic. And just some quotes here that I have from interviews are from the academic institution themselves. They said they do have institutional support. They call it knowledge transfer, however, where they transfer knowledge about ecological resource management, system resilience. So again, more educational than financial. As well, one of the fishery leaders of small-scale fisheries in Purworejo stated that the support is indirect support because what is being developed is tourism, which is only additional income, so it's not directly benefiting fisheries. As well, the head of women fishers for Purworejo Muaro Demak also mentioned that there is assistance, but it's in the form of either fishing gear, boat engines, or administrative assistant or insurance. So again, a little different forms of training, calling to light that there is this support, but it needs to be strengthened and understood in better ways for fishers. Here we go. So another question is, what are some ways you think you could help increase fisher awareness about institutional support being provided by institutions? As I mentioned, at least from my research, a lot of the fishers didn't understand or know what was being supported by other governments or institutions and what wasn't. So I'd be interested to know sort of what strategies or what ideas we can think of to help increase this awareness of, hey, like, yeah, this educational program is brought to you by the government of, or the Marine Resource Institute, who's trying to help improve your livelihood, or the boat engine was provided by the local government. So I'm interested to hear some ideas and ways we can increase this awareness. Yeah, Prateep again.
Okay.
Sorry, I took the benefit of silence,
That's okay. Yeah, please.
So there are 2 points, and one is, of course, you need to increase the channels through which, information reaches these people. Okay. And that could be government, non-government, civil society, and all possible channels, electronic, non-electronic, and all of those kind of things. And that's in many ways the conventional approach. But the other approach from a co-management, and very pertinent to your research, is, see, the argument is, if fishers are involved in those decision makings, they're automatically aware. You don't need to tell them that this is the policy. If they're involved in the policy making, if they're involved in the process of creating those things that they need to be aware of, so there is no need for awareness building. It automatically happens because they are part of that process itself. So I think that could be an integral part of, or a crucial part of co-management, where their participation, their involvement and consultation, and they being in the driver's seat automatically leads to their awareness. So there is no question about they being informed, which is a top-down process, which could be a top-down process. So I think so that's the twist you could bring in your research to say, hey, involve them. Awareness is automatically built.
Yeah, and that's a great point to say. The easiest solution is just to involve the fishers from the beginning, like from step one. And it's baffling to me that they haven't been involved in these decisions from step one, because they are so effective or affected by these decisions. So thank you very much, Prateep. Those are great points. We can move to the next hand. Yeah.
Pratik has already mentioned most of the things, but as I wrote it down, one is bottom-up approach to management, which means it starts from them. And the second one is better interaction between the institutions that are in charge of the small-scale fishers and the small-scale fishers themselves. Then better extension or improved extension services and public campaign. He's already sort of mentioned all of it in his contribution, but I just read out what I've listed down. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that public campaign is a good one. And you mentioned a lot of other ones like bottom-up approach and the interactions between fishers. Just strengthening those relationships and those linkages would help benefit this area as well. Yeah, great points there. I think one last question here, Riel. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think similar responses, but I will talk about based on the existing governance system. So a couple of things. One is access to information. The institutions should ensure that the communities have access to information. And second point is community should understand what is the information is about. In most cases, they maybe not there literate. So there should be a simple and easy way to educate the community members and raise their awareness. For example, in my country, the language in policies are like mostly Bengali, which is the mother tongue of us. But the policies are written in a way, I understand Bengali, but for me as well to read it and understand it, it's really complex. It's really tough. So that language should be simple. That language should be easier to understand. And those who are not educated, there should be a peer learning process. There is a proverb like a birds can understand another bird's language, right? So there should be a process or arrangement that community-wide, as Foluke mentioned, community-wide campaign or announcement or assign peers to let other people know what is going on and what is the policies about, if there is any amendment or any changes in policies.
Yeah, those were great points. I'll jump in just a second. I see a couple more hands up. I think Angun, we can go to you there.
Yeah, thank you. Is it my voice can be heard?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to share my opinions and experience with some which think you could help increase future awareness about institutional support being provided by institution. First of all, in Universitas Diponegoro, we also do like community service activities, which we came to the community in some location that are far from the city, like in the rural area, and then we do like some activities, share experience, share knowledge, and something like that. So I think based on my experience and less activities, it could help to increase the fisher awareness. Thank you.
Yeah, great points on how academic institutions can help facilitate this fisher awareness and help really spearhead this this process. Yeah, great points. One more hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. But I think I have different way to increase the fisher awareness.
Yeah.
In government, there is senators in every years. They gathering the people from the area to get some voices, so the fisher can get some budget from them to get they need it. Nah, according from that, maybe we can also add some political way from the senator. Is there any chance for that? Thank you.
Yeah, great points on how governments can also be used to help influence and increase awareness of institutional support through that political backing, like was mentioned earlier, and how small-scale fishers don't have that political backing or that voice. So by transitioning and improving that, we can improve fisher awareness. Yeah, fantastic points. A lot of great conversations there. We'll keep moving. Almost there. So again, wrapping up based on the adaptive co-management indicators, the graphs that we saw are great discussions. What does this mean? So it means adaptive co-management can be implemented or transitioned to within Tambak Belusan because they have strong relationships with all 10 indicators, meaning that the current management regime of co-governance, collaborative management could be adapted and transitioned into adaptive co-management with more ease because they have all 10 indicators present. Within Pawarjo Moro Damak, however, with the increased strengthening of institutional support, then adaptive co-management could be implemented. However, as we noted and had great discussions on, there needs to be a little more strengthening of that institutional support, of that capital, either through awareness or through educational programs to make it more easily transitioned to within Pawarjo. But overall, adaptive co-management can be seen to help these communities transition to vulnerable to viable through the various indicators that are present, through the social networks, through trust, through adaptability, increasing resilience and capacity to dynamic change. These are just various ways that this new form of governance can help transition current governance to more viable ways. And yeah, just on mentioning that, adaptive co-management improves social networks that we talked about previously, whether that be with academics or institutions. It's increasing social capital, such as trust, adaptability, as I mentioned. It strengthens learn by doing approaches to governance, so really working on reflective practices, learning from the fishers themselves and what has worked, what hasn't worked. I've already said that point. And really, it uses the reflections, adaptation, and user connectivity to make these fisheries viable. And then sort of a last little wrap-up question here. I know we're getting close onto the time, but do you think adaptive co-management is the way forward or is an avenue for a way forward for V2V transitions in small-scale fisheries? Or is there another viable pathway that could be used, or maybe I'm not aware of, to help transition fisheries from vulnerable to viable? I know it's a big sort of thought-provoking question at the end. So take your time if you need to think about it. But for myself, I do think adaptive co-management is a way forward as a governance for small-scale fisheries because of the way it builds resilience, builds capital, builds trust, and allows these sort of diverse systems to respond to dynamic change or ecological variations or social interactions. But I know there's also other ways, so I'd be interested to hear. Yep, Prateep?
Yeah, I'm prompted to speak because your questions are very interesting and challenging, and I like them a lot. I think it's a good question, but if you go a little bit deeper into the question, you will find that transitions are drivers. Transitions are either influenced or motivated by various drivers. So there is no one source that influences the transitions, and therefore there cannot be one approach or one pathway to B2B transitions. While SEM, adaptive co-management, could be one of the important mechanisms for B2B transitions, there needs to be a way to find out what other complementary and parallel approaches that can work in tandem with SEM to not only create these pathways, but also to make these pathways effective for transitions from vulnerability to viability. And that would then address the critical question about, in a complex, uncertain world, there is no one way to think about things, and therefore there is no one way to, resolve or respond to challenges that we face.
Yeah, and that's a great point, bringing up that, and touching on drivers there, that this V2V is more of a continuum. You have drivers that can push you towards viability, but you also have drivers that can push you towards vulnerability. And I think ACM is sort of one way to help facilitate that. But like you mentioned, that it can also be used in tandem with other governance approaches or other things to help strengthen these. So fantastic point to help us wrap up there. Does anyone else want to touch? Yep.
Yes, I also want to mention that local situations we have to be taken into consideration in whatever pathways are being taken. And I agree with Pratik that there are several pathways, and because of changing situations and circumstances, even the economy of the world that is changing now, one cannot just stay with one pathway and say that is the absolute pathway. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Sort of that there is no one solid approach to solve something. No one approach is going to immediately flip a switch and you're going to solve the fisheries vulnerability. It is a continual evolving process that continuously needs work. And I think the work we're doing is helping spearhead that and helping work towards this process of viability within fisheries. Great questions. And with that, that's the presentation and everything. I'm happy to take questions on the presentation or on adaptive co-management or fisheries in general. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for the great discussions and everything we've done. It's really been knowledgeable and helps me increase my knowledge as well, and hope it's done the same for you all too.
Great presentation, Murray, and a lot of good discussions, a lot of good takeaways, I believe. So we will have some short reflection based on the session today, and I believe it will go through the V2V digest, V2V Commons, coming this 15th of March. So again, if as Murray said, if anybody has any questions on his presentation so far, feel free to reach out, and we will meet again in a couple of months. Sorry, in May. So April we will not have any webinar. We'll come back again in May. Normally we do it in every other month, in the second Tuesday, but based on our availability, we had to move it to Wednesday for this one. So hopefully everyone will join to the next one. And until then, stay safe, stay well. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Riel. Nice to see you. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for the presentation, Murray. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you. No problem. I think this will be recorded.